What I have is somewhat of a sci-fi image, I think, exposing the rudiments of flesh tones with a glamour type of image. Basically, that's kind of transitioning into a chrome skull. I try to do things that are pretty easy to do so people can actually learn the basics, expose them to the sequences of color and masking, and of course loose masking. What we're going to start off here on this image is the basic flesh tone concept, which again is basic glamour art. Glamour art is basically somewhat relevant to pinup art. It's fundamentally pretty crisp. You always have the option to soften everything up depending on how you hold the shields off of the surface. But we're going to go ahead and base coat this with an opaque flesh tone, come in with light brown, dark brown, and then some paint brushes to refine it. Once we set this up, then we're going to basically jump over here to the skull and show you some of the, or more of the fundamentals of the chrome concepts, the blues, the grays, the blacks, and the white highlights, and hopefully have an approachable piece here. Again, in the inception of learning airbrush, you don't want to overstimulate people. Some people have requisite knowledge of the skill, but I try to do really cookie cutter, approachable types of images. And as always, I like working really big because I think you get more chances if you work big. When I say that you actually get more chances by working big, I'm really referring to that you have more room to taper your strokes as opposed to working really dinky. You're going to be forced to use the mini shields and all the freehand templates and so on. But when you work big like this, it gives you, in my opinion, a lot more room to taper your strokes. You can actually see what you're doing a little bit better, and so on. I'm going to come in here with some opaque flesh tone here. The type of flesh tone, as we learned on previous videos, is really up to you as far as how orange or yellowish that you want it. And I'm going to come in here and dust over the lips here. And one of the first things you want to try to do is not kill your reference lines, your pencil lines here. You want to kind of subdue them a little bit and calm them down, and you really don't want to totally cake over them because you won't be able to see where actually shadows stop and start. Some of the flesh tones that you will buy will be a more peachy type of tone. Some of them are more orange and yellowish, which I think is really just a preference. So at the foundation here, I'm just going to kind of stay off the eye. Dust this out, and this will be the foundation type of coat here. Now the portrait side of this is actually going to be the top layer. The skull will be underneath it. This will fragment and somewhat look suspended with the drop shadows on top of the skull here. And I'm just going to go down here and go ahead and dust over the lips. Sometimes a lot of people, especially on t-shirts or what have you, people will come in and just spray red on top of the white lips. But I think that adding the flesh tone at the base here actually accents them quite nicely. So again, don't kill your pencil lines here, but since this is an opaque color, we want to subdue and calm the pencil lines down. Okay, and as always, I like to mention that anytime you're actually tracing an image out with the projector, the shadows, the starting and stopping points, are just as important as the lips, the nose, and the eyes. So what I've done here with my light browns, I've started shading where the shadow is on the nose. And I'll wisp one way here. I'm going to go ahead and start filling in the eyebrow here. One thing that I tell my students, and I wrote it in my book too, is that when you actually come in at an angle, it's going to actually help you taper better. There's something about this Createx light brown that really just looks good on top of pretty much any flesh tone. You see how when I come in at an angle like this, and the angle is about 10 degrees, it gives me a better tapering ability. I'm going to kind of fog this in under the eye. Looking at the photo reference about every 30 seconds is always a good habit. The amount of freehanding you want to do is always up to you. If you want to put 80 hours into a piece, it's whatever floats your boat. Pupil in the center of the eye also is really a preference on how acute or how soft you want to make that and how much detail and so on. I'll start fogging in the nose. And as always, I want to kind of implement my rule that I've always implemented, which is controls always learned by working bigger to smaller and then lighter to darker. Lighter to darker means exactly like we're doing now. I usually stay back about 5 to 6 inches when I'm dusting things. And I'll continue to shade down here. I'll give a little nuance of the nose. So always move around. I'm working in little wisps. A little bit of shadow on the side of the face here. And I have the perimeter of the face masked off for right now. I will eventually cut the ear out and just kind of freehand that. I really just want to kind of trap the face and establish the form and the dimension. Now that I've actually established where the shadow starts and stops, I can come in and taper it out a little bit. By basically backing off, increasing my space. And up here we'll go ahead and shade around the forehead. Kind of give that a roll around. On the perimeter of the face here, you actually have an option, which I'll make a decision later on, if you want to trap it with contact paper or frisk it, or you can, if you want to, you make these decisions as you go along. You can come in here with the freehand templates and trap the edge that way too. I just try to crawl through things as I go and then make compositional decisions basically on what works. Now you definitely don't want to leave this void here. I'm going back about 7 or 8 inches. Just kind of fogging some paint in this area to transition that from dark to light. And zooming in here on the eye, take my time and pay attention to the little creases and how they taper. And again, no hard, acute edges yet, just coming in here and basically assigning the value of all these little areas. And I'll get a little bit closer here. Again, I'm tapering the airbrush, or really coming in at a 10-degree angle. This is kind of like a cat claw stroke that I always talk about. A dagger stroke is a horizontal stroke where you're coming in an inverted type of way. Like that. This stroke right here is a cat claw stroke, the same type of inverted behavior with the airbrush, but you're not crylining back and forth. You don't want to get too creasy right here. I always tell people you'll make it look like one of those little animatronics characters on Rudolph or whatever. We have the crease of the cheek established right here. I'm going to fade that out on this side. Okay, I'll bring in my template here and trap the bottom part of the nose, like so. Wipe the paint off and then extend the edge like this to trap the nostril. Always start off real light at first just to basically see exactly where you're at here as far as starting and stopping. Maybe taper this out a little bit. There's going to be a lot of shadow here, so a lot of this is really kind of subdued. You can barely see it because of the way it was photographed. I'll just kind of dust over that for now. And I'll continue this over like so. And watch what I do. I'll just take my shield, let me slow down here, turn it, and trap the nostril like that. Okay. Once we have the edges, we can come in and put a wash, like so, which creates the dimension. Now in this case, this is the hotter point of light here on the nose in this area. So I'll be real careful with how much tone I put there. You can see we basically have the roll around. And then we're going to come in here, we're going to try to split the jawline. We do a wash of paint to see where we're going. We'll come in here and take a French curve. It's pretty much on the money, especially when we're working this big. Wipe the paint off as you go here. And we're going to sculpt the chin out. Also, the jawline and the chin. So that's the edge. There's a shadow down here. And see how we can start to set that up. This is going to be the upper crease of the eye. Now the more transparent the template, the more you will know where you're stopping and starting. I've said that on my other videos. Let's do a practice run there. You can see how we get the initial crease. Try not to reposition wet paint. And I'm going to bring my other little tiny shield here, and I'm going to split the eye right here. Now let me explain something. I've actually went to a thinner template. I used this on my portrait and peelback video because I need a more acute edge here. Acute meaning crisp. So when you're rendering, you want to do somewhat softer edges, maybe on the upper part of the eye here. But when I come down to these areas, I definitely want to make sure that I sneak other templates in. And again, you can see how I'm really doing just little wisps. And zooming in, I'll come back in with my French curve. And again, there's a dimensional point here between the inside of the eye. You have a little ridge here, and then I'm going to sneak in the freehand template or the French curve. Just give that a little bit of an accent. I'm going to come with the paintbrush and kind of subdue or counterbalance all this stuff here with the eyelashes and so on. This might be a little bit softer where the eye breaks into the shadow right here. And let's come in right here, just very faintly, put an indication of a split where the muscle of the eye meets the actual eye right there. Now when we get down to these areas, there's a lot of freehanding. Again, this is where you make those decisions on how much time you want to put into something. Sometimes I like it when the pressure drops on certain airbrushes because your trigger softens up. And that kind of comes in handy when you're doing eye muscles and so on. Put in the eyelashes. This is a high contrast image, so there's actually quite a bit of shadow, cast shadows around the eyes and so on. Okay, I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and just scratch a little basic round highlight in the eye here. Some people will just take a white paintbrush and just put a dot on here, but I like scratching because you can actually control if the dot gets too kind of blotchy. Okay, I'm going to come in with my dark brown now. This is transparent dark brown, and This is one of my favorite colors, especially when you're doing flesh tones, because it really kind of transitions this black and this light brown together. So when I'm coming in with dark brown, just like on my chiaroscuro video, I call this accenting piercing. And what's that mean in airbrush terms? It means we're getting a little bit closer and we're kind of bringing things together, kind of refining and tightening things, kind of blending things together. And back to our early area here. See how that pops the eye out. And I'll take my shield and lightly accent this area here. Again, the French curves are thicker, so you're going to get a more subdued edge. And that's what you need in composition. You need a combination of crisp edges, like right in here on the inside of the eye, and then you need softer edges in the transition of the roll around. Sometimes on the eye, I will take this template and just shade the top edge, like here, and just leave the bottom part soft. Makes it more believable as opposed to just totally cropping everything off. I did that on my portrait and pillback video, but again, it's just a preference. You can see how that starts to come together pretty quickly there. The flesh tone formula, I've always kept it real simple. A lot of people, if you get up on the internet, really overthink flesh tones. It's actually very amusing. They try to mix certain peach colors, and especially in the automotive field, it's hard to get a hold of a really good flesh tone formula. A lot of people try to mix root beer with pagan gold and so on. But in the acrylic family, it's pretty simple. Base coat, opaque flesh, then light brown, then dark brown for piercing. Now you always have the option, depending on the ethnicity of the person, to come in with a transparent red or yellow. And a tiny bit of green over that. Get up to the eyebrows here, I'm going to take my paintbrush, and I usually like to start where the eyebrow tapers and do small little strokes. Keep in mind, these are not cheesy crisscrossy types of lines. I'll just keep painting these on here. This basically, again, is a counterbalance to the fuzziness of the airbrushing. The airbrush sometimes makes things look really rushed and not believable sometimes too. So in composition, you need to tighten everything up. In between passes, you want to make sure you're wiping off the French curve here on a towel or something so you don't reposition wet paint. And with the same dark brown, we'll accent the jawline here. Okay, got a little bit of overspray right here. I'm going to take some transparent light brown and just lightly kind of glaze the side of the face here. And we'll base coat the ear flesh tone here. And we'll come in here with some light brown. Just trap the ear here. And now some dark brown. Remember, we're piercing and accenting. Yeah, come in with this transparent red here and get started on the lips. First thing I'm going to do is come in and sketch, as always. Now again, this initial flesh tone is going to come in handy because it's actually going to counterbalance the loudness of the red here. Take my bird shield and split the lips through the middle. I'm going to do some softer passes just to kind of see where I'm starting and stopping and sculpting the edges here. The lips kind of taper in their own nature, so you don't want to be a cheese ball and totally do a real abrasive or harsh stopping point right here. Now at the bottom of the lip here, I'm going to come in and stay true to my initial reference lines. Bring the shield in here. I'm going to lift the shield off the surface just to subdue the edge. You don't want Mr. Potato Head lips here. Now watch what I do. This is critical here. I've started an edge. I'm going to flip this around, and I still have the template held off the surface, and I'm going to continue the edge here. Probably about 1/10 of an inch off the surface here. You can see how that gives you more of a subdued type of edge. And I'll do another pass here. Now it's going to continue over here, so I'll go ahead and align that now. And then the face pretty much breaks off into the chrome teeth over here. And I'll go over the top part of the lip here and retrap this. Now when I get to the very end of the lips here, the edge, I really want to try to revert to a shield, because a shield is going to allow you more of a acute taper as opposed to trying to come in and freehand everything. And I'll split these a little bit harder now through the middle, so we can actually see the cast shadow of the upper lip here. Okay, I have the face covered up here with the clear contact paper. I went ahead and cut out the shredders. This part of the skull is exposed, but what I'm doing is I just came in and snuck a piece of contact paper in. The red line here is really just so the viewer can pick up where the skull stops and the background starts. Just really, it's like a reference point to show you what I'm doing. Now for chrome to work, you really need high contrasting values. And in this case, I'm just going to kind of, for the sake of time, just get in and out and blast the background black. And that's actually going to, again, provide the contrasting features to manipulate a chrome look. So again, on canvas, it's always a good idea to tack the surface so that the paint does not bleed underneath, just like you would on a car hood. I'm just going to come in here, this is opaque black. I'm really just going to isolate the perimeter and the background of the skull here. It's going to take some discipline to be able to kind of posture yourself and keep the airbrush angled that way. It's easy to get lazy and tilt over a little bit. But once you catch this edge, you're going to have to go back in and do reconstructive surgery. That'll be a nightmare. And before we yank the contact paper off, we'll hit this with some heat. And we'll take this off here. And with that exposed, I didn't have a lot of bleeding. And again, that was because I tacked the surface. So what I'm going to do next is come in with my Createx transparent gray. I'm not going to keep black in the airbrush and come in here and do all this shading, because again, black's very dominant. For chrome to work, and I've said this on my other video, you really need different levels and intensities of grays and black. So I've always said that control is learned by working bigger to smaller, which is what we're doing right now, and then from lighter to darker. So the actual transparent gray, and again, thin it down as much as you want to, but the transparent gray is going to allow us to establish all the different intensities and nuances that chrome has. There's a lot of different levels and intensities that you need to assign, which is the value for this actually to work and actually look refractive and high contrast and so on. And I come in here, remember the shredders are covered up with contact paper, and I'm definitely not going to Krylon back and forth. I'm just going to put a really sneaky, little soft, subdued drop shadow. I will make decisions on exactly how far I want these suspended off the surface, but for right now, I'm just kind of getting my motor running and just really doing the assigning of the tonalities. So this is the middle part of the skull here. And that's what, again, we're doing with the transparent gray. It's just setting everything up. I'll use a bunch of different shields to come in here and split edges. It's really whatever floats your boat. I always tell people that you can use Hallmark greeting cards. You can use a lot of different things to establish edges. There's another shadow up here where this shredder is. Again, I'm not a big fan of Kryloning back and forth, waving the airbrush back and forth, especially on shredders and even drop shadows on flames, is because if you Krylon back and forth, move the airbrush back and forth, you could end up with a tapering little patch on the end here. Shadows dissipate, they kind of supersede or go beyond their point of origin. So wisping one way is a really, really good thing. And we'll come in here with the transparent gray and just really lightly kind of sketch, start to sketch everything in. Any type of chrome concept is pretty tricky because you really have to pay attention to the nuances and intensities of every little area. I think a lot of people run skulls in the ground, but again, just for stuff like this, they're very good teaching exercises. So I split the skull bone right there, and I did an edge here, like so. And let's recap. I can go up here now and split this area. Now I can put my knuckles underneath this French curve here and give subtle little nuance blends like so. That might taper out. And I can start trapping some of these areas down here like so. So not only are we assigning different depths and values of our shading, we're actually assigning different intensities of edges and so on. Some edges are crisp, right up against the surface, and some of them are subdued, and I call them knuckled. And then we can sneak in our freehanding in conjunction with that. And as always, if you try to freeze frame every little stroke that I do, you'll see that I'm actually just wisping one way. There's a little crease here. See if I can get away with this. Make sure I'm on point. Some freehand shading right in here. Again, the black is what pops all this out at the end. This area here is definitely an area, the middle part of the nose is a high contrast area, which the eye actually picks up from a distance. And we'll come in and start darkening in this eye here. Again, use whatever floats your boat. I got so many templates, it's not even funny. Some of them I will break in half because they just fit a specific purpose. But this actually works well. You're not cheating if you're using templates. A lot of people call them stencils. I've said on every video that I make that really gets on my nerves. There's a difference between using a template and a stencil. A stencil is like a palm tree. A stencil is like a happy face, a sunshine, a butterfly, whatever. A template takes a little bit more skill to be able to use because you're actually isolating shapes and edges and trying to manipulate people's eyeballs. There's a little area here where the nose comes up and protrudes underneath this flesh shredder. So I'm just going to sneak this little template in here. Just kind of block that out lightly. Now the dimension starts protruding out here, so I'll back off, kind of slope around. There's some tone right here. This will help me create the dimension. I can emphasize some of this a little bit stronger now. I'll come in with some opaque white now and try to sculpt some of this back out. That's the beauty of doing chrome. Again, you can come back in with white, different grays, black, and so on. Yeah, I'll come back in with my transparent gray here. Go ahead and put a shadow under this Fleshtone shredder. I think I'll go to 2 hands here, so don't wiggle the airbrush around too much. I'm just going to start sculpting out these teeth, sketching first. This is always going to be a must to come in and start sketching just like you would with a pencil before you come in and get too dominant. Now the goal here is actually going to be to make these teeth look like chrome, so I'm not just going to do the typical shading like I did on my Electroskull DVD. I'm going to come in here and try to give these little nuances, like right now, going right through the middle of the teeth. Not too dark though. You can see that starts to set up one of the dynamics of metal or chrome. And we'll come in here on the teeth with my shield. And again, all we're really doing is isolating the gum area here. That's going to be pretty close right there. And we'll split the teeth here. You can trap the perimeter of every single tooth if you want to. Again, I can come in with black, but not yet. Just want to set all these up. This kind of rolls around here. Might as well use this shield to do that. Every single little tooth here can be trapped at its perimeter to create the form. A little bit darker right here. And let's go ahead and throw a shadow in down here. Okay, we'll go ahead and split the jawline right here. Again, very, very light. Just to kind of see where we're at. That's the edge. We're going to put a little wash on here. Just to kind of give it a roll around with some dimension. A bit of shading on the side of the neck here. And I'll start doing some shading down here. Paint what you see, not what you think you see. Chrome is going to have a lot of little indentions and so on. You want to try to really emphasize those as much as possible. You're going to have to get an airbrush that actually allows you to taper some of these intense little areas here. Anything I overwork, I can definitely come back in with some white. That's the beauty of doing chrome. And up here, put a subtle indentation that will help us with the metal look also. There's a dark area here. I'm going to come in here with my black now and really start popping stuff out. You'll be able to see what I'm talking about as far as the contrasting components of all this and how it manipulates the eyeball. This part right here is actually the part that presupposes the background, the black background. So I'm making decisions as I go along here on how intense to spray certain areas. This part right here will be a little bit lighter than that, but still we need it separated from the background. Come in here and split this area. Even though we're using black, we still don't want to get too carried away with it. Black is a very powdery, opaque type of color, and we could very easily come in and kill this. I would actually call this the stage of piercing or refining, where you're really coming in here and doing some final detail. You can add airbrush mediums or whatever floats your boat to your paint to help you get it to be, to feather and melt the graininess of this opaque black, because opaque black is definitely very grainy. Just working in the standard gray is really fuzzy, as you can see in this area here. So the black is the counterbalance, or really helps transition all these shadow nuances. This is again what I call sculpting the edges. You're using whatever you need to use to isolate these teeth as a single entity. I'm getting really close to when I'm doing this. Now if you're feeling a little bit neurotic, you can definitely come in with some contact paper, but I've trained myself to really just try to control the overspray, and if I keep messing with this, I can just, as you see here, I can sculpt out every single tooth as I crawl along. I would say one way to describe this movement is just to do little wisps. Little wisps gives you control. Real close when I'm doing this, piercing these teeth out. Let's go over here. Now when I'm coming in with my black here to fine tune these shadows, this is what will really, when I take the contact paper off, give this thing the aesthetical manipulation of realism and contrast and so on. I'm probably spraying 75% on the mask here, or the contact paper, and 25% on the surface. Let's trap the bottom of that tooth. Again, if you actually overshoot these teeth, you can come in here and just hit them with some white, pop them back out. Now again, it probably would have been easier just to come in here and cut a piece of contact paper, cover these teeth up, but I'm really just trying to prove a point that if you get good with these shields, or you get used to them anyway, you can really minimalize the cutting. Let's go through the middle like we did on the top teeth. Shade the side of this tooth. Each side, stripe through the middle. And again, from a distance, this will manipulate or presuppose a chrome look on the teeth. Now I'll come in on this shredder here with my opaque black. And again, these little dark areas, when I take this contact paper off, are really going to help me manipulate this effect. Come in here and trap the inside of the nose here on the skull. Be kind of random there. See how that pops that out? I may have to come in and rework certain parts of this nose depending on how much detail I want to put in there. Let's come in on the eye with the black here. Now remember, black travels really easily, especially when something's clear coated. You can always see where the black is. I'm using opaque black. You can use transparent or tinting black if you want to. And we'll come in down here and pop this area out. Taper that off like so. Come in down here now. Accent this a little bit. Definitely get in here and do some freehanding. I wrote in my book that it's definitely not a sacrilege to freehand anything. Freehand's a must, but you got to be able to expedite the process of freehanding with using unconventional tricks and techniques. Now chrome, one of the biggest manipulative things about chrome is that the tapering of the little black and white nuances is what really makes it work. When light refracts things, it makes lines bend, it makes highlights bend, taper to a really finite point. So from a distance, this is what the eye catches, and this is what makes it work. So I'm going to come in, and it's a very fine taper, which kind of dissipates. Let's do one here. I'm going to knuckle this. It's another tapering area. And this is the point where I could get all over the place and spend 80 hours on this thing. I got to try to keep it in a teaching mode where people can actually do this. But these little tapering areas, some people will come in here with pencils and continue to taper. That's always an option. But this is what makes it work. These edges and taperings that the eye picks up from a distance. You can see how the black really starts adding the value to this. This is all pretty solid over here. Areas like this, when I'm shading, notice how I'm going to point with the template here. I have this dark area, and then I have this white area right here. It's very important to retain those areas. There's another tapered type of area here, as you can see. Also, a note of mention here is a lot of this may not even look believable to the very, very end. When you come in and you hit it with that transparent blue. That blue at the very, very end will pick a lot of this back up and kind of counterbalance it. I'm going to really come in here now and punch this area out. I won't come in here too many more times. Again, about 75% on the plastic, 25% on the surface. There's a little taper down here. You need these tapering edges. This is a real good example of that right here. There's an edge that tapers. This is what the eye picks up from a distance. This is all going to be pretty dark down here in certain areas. So now you should be able to see, again, some of the values that I'm talking about. How this all kind of works together and starts manipulating your eyeballs. But you have to be able to taper and not get the cramp in your hand with the airbrush that you have. I'll come in on my shredders up here with my black. And we'll come in here with our little tapering edge here. You see how it starts to look like chrome even at this level. We're kind of counterbalancing this overspray. If I had to put a technical term on this, I would call this flashing the white out. We do it on water drops, but again, it creates a little glowing type of look that the eye will catch from a distance. Okay, moving on here, I'm really getting to the level of refinement that I like, but it's time to do some micro tuning, what I call micro tuning, and really getting in and taking care of little discrepancies, white line, and so on. I've removed the mask also to be able to see exactly what is too busy, what potentially has been overshaded, and so on. And I'm also going to come in here and continue to try to balance out the tonalities. It's a real good idea once you're this deep into a piece as far as time-wise to definitely take that mask off, put a fresh piece on there so you can see exactly if you have overshot anything, if anything is contrasting color-wise. And I really think it really just helps you establish a lot more balance as opposed to going in and overworking it. I'm going to continue now shading the head area here. Again, just to try to tighten and refine the darker areas. Hopefully you're catching on here. We can see that I'm going back and forth, back and forth. I've said that throughout this whole video, but you really are going to need to. You cannot just rely certainly on black because, again, the realism of all this is dependent on the different intensities of black to gray and certainly the accenting of the white. Okay, let's come in here with the transparent blue here, so you can see that. And this is definitely the fun part, but you don't want to get too carried away. I always tell my students that the tinting distance is usually 1 to 2 hands back, maybe about 13, 14 inches. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, again, this is a transparent blue. I'm just going to try to focus on the darker areas with this. I don't want to get too carried away. Just lightly mist it. One thing that's going to help everybody is if you come in with a piece of contact paper and just put it over the image and practice on the contact paper to see how much will be too much. If you overdo it, like I may, you can definitely come back in with your white again. But what this is doing, this is counterbalancing the graininess of the black against the white. And it's also adding kind of a mystical type of nuance to the image. It calms a lot of the white down. Now the camera itself, for the most part, is somewhat looking like it's already got the blue on there, but it actually doesn't if you've seen this thing sitting in front of it. The quality of light that we use actually makes it look somewhat blue, but in person this thing looks totally black and white and very grainy. You could also add, if you want to in the future, essences of transparent purple. Sometimes you'll see green in chrome. But this blue at the end of the image, or near the end of the image, is really, I think, what helps the whole concept, and it actually transitions it from a normal boring skull to a chrome refractive type of surface. This area over here was very grainy, so that's one area that I'm putting a lot of blue in. And again, I'm mainly spraying on the darker areas, kind of letting the overspray crawl around onto the white areas. But again, I may have to go back and pierce and re-highlight some of the white areas. Okay, and with the mask off here, I'm going to come in and do some more final piercing and highlighting. Again, you're going back and forth in making decisions. This is art, and if something is too dominant or needs to be emphasized, that's the beauty of the chrome effect here. Go back and forth. Okay, this area right here, I definitely don't have a template that's going to fit that, so I'll just come in here with some tape real quick and isolate that. This is actually what illustrators do. Professional illustrators will just kind of make edges as they go. But I don't have a template that's going to fit that area. And we'll come in here and don't get too carried away. Flash this back out. This is only the look that an airbrush can give you. Paintbrushes will never give you this type of realism when you're doing things like chrome. I'm going to take this template here and I'll go in and emphasize certain areas of the teeth for the highlights. Again, I would call this micro tuning. We're basically just cleaning the image up. You can see how I got rid of some of the overspray there. Again, it's up to you. If you want to go in and mask everything off, you can, but I really don't think it's necessary as long as you're careful and you get a template that allows you to control the overspray. Now this edge right here was jaggedy, but this one right here is pretty straight, so I can just attack the surface here. Kind of frost this out. I'm still retaining my blue here. Even though I'm coming back in with white, I'm still retaining the blue. I'm not killing it. You can see the level and the gradient of qualities that we have here. I put some tape here at the base of the neck. Just want to go in and frost an indication of the bright spot of the neck here. Then I have some tape here, and again, I did not have a template that would fix that, so I'm going to try to keep my continuity, stay straight up and down. Again, just give a little nuance of the bright spot of the chrome. I'm being a little random in this area here. And I'll put a few distress marks here with my paintbrush. And I'll be real careful not to dig too deep on these. Sometimes I like to taper the scratches out also. Makes it look more believable. And I'll come in and trap this area here. You can see basically how I split that right there to give a dimension, a little bit of a sloping nature. Let's go ahead and wrap this up here. I've basically taken this flesh shredder and I've brought it back protruding over the eye here, just because the eye was actually, or this area here was kind of boring, and I thought there was too much negative space there, so I brought that back. I've been going back and forth with these highlights, blue and white, gray and black, gray and black. There's really no one sequence when you're doing chrome to where it's like A, B, C, D and you're finished. You're always going to be struggling to try to find the relativity of the light sourcing. When you're doing something this involved, and trust me, it can get a lot more involved than this, you're really making decisions as you go, when to pierce something back out, when to calm it down, how intense to get in what area. This area here, if you saw one of my other videos, this would be like a full tone. This is about a half tone in here. This is definitely a full tone in this area of the eye. The middle of the nose here, this is a full tone. And I'm basically looking at certain areas and again assigning the value of how dark something is in what area. And that's how I talk to myself, or that's my internal dialogue. Is something a full tone, half tone, quarter tone, or is it void? This would be a void area here. You're going to have to find a way to talk to yourself when you're doing the assigning of value in a particular area. So I hope you've learned something today. We'll see you next time.